movie was almost 4 hours.
If you're going to have an almost 4-hour movie, every part of this movie needs to be solid.
I don't know if I would just run out there and say, it's the best movie I've seen. Like you said, Scorsese has other movies that have performed better, but also resonate more. Is that correct?
That's a nice way to put it.
Hi, I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we will be discussing The Killers of the Flower Moon.
Great, let's get started.
After Ernest Burkhart rejoins his family in search of a new life, he falls for Osage native Molly Kyle. However, as time goes on, Ernest is forced to participate in the murders of his wife's close family by his uncle, William Hale, as the two sides of an increasingly tense community are on the verge of exploding over the wealth concentrated around them.
Rebecca, let's talk about why we chose this movie.
I've been really enjoying Martin Scorsese's creative output the last few years. Letting him off the leash seems to be the best thing for this man's career. Also, the story of the Flower Moon killings is honestly quite forgotten in American culture, and it's nice to see a spotlight put on an issue that's still affecting us today.
Rebecca, this isn't the first time the Osage community has been discussed, meaning this movie is actually taken from a book in 2018, and my understanding is Martin Scorsese had read the book and was so compelled he really wanted to make this movie.
It seems like whatever ends up on that man's nightstand somehow ends up as a movie. I mean, Goodfellas is also a memoir based off of Henry Hill's memoir.
Yes.
One of the things I was really excited too about this was Martin didn't just take the biographer's word for it. He went to the Osage people and said, how can I tell this story?
Correct. And my understanding is he had several meetings with them before they actually even agreed to not have him tell the story, but allow him access and to give him more information to make this more accurate. Obviously, you want the story told and you want the story to be told accurately and correctly. And so I respect the fact that he took the time to do that versus just, like you said, just reading the book or just knowing the story, because I think it's 3 movies that they've done. I also seen podcasts and different parts. So it's not the first time it's been told. However, the movie, correct, right? It's almost 4 hours. So it's definitely an epic story that he is telling, and it wasn't short and didn't feel like there were a lot of shortcuts in the movie.
One of the things I was really genuinely surprised was that Martin took the time to involve the native peoples of the Osage, not just in the initial asking process, but also in the production process. I did read some interviews talking about how it was important for the Osage crafts to be featured in this movie. And if you pay attention, there's a lot of little details that really spotlight the rich cultural history of the Osage, especially during this point in time.
Rebecca, let's talk about who was in the movie.
Our primary focus is going to be around Leonardo DiCaprio as Ernest Burkhart. Robert De Niro is William King Hale.
Yes.
Ernest's uncle, scheming uncle.
Oh, yes.
And Lily Gladstone as Molly Burkhart. I really love Lily. I think she's my standout piece in this movie.
Well, and it's funny, too, because Robert De Niro, great actor, clearly. And I enjoyed his performance. I think I enjoyed his performance maybe a little bit more than you. Is that correct?
I believe that's the case. And I know you and I discussed on our way to the studio that you enjoyed Leo's performance more than I did.
Well, okay, and let's talk about that, because I felt he was well cast. I felt he did a good job. It felt reasonably compelling, and I've seen him in other pieces where he was more compelling. I know one of our Cocoon Cast team members had said maybe a younger version of him may have hit that out of the park a little bit more.
I'm thinking of Leo specifically from Gangs of New York.
Yes, another Scorsese movie, correct?
Another Scorsese movie, one of my top, if not my top.
Ah, okay.
I see Leo as there is a charisma to him, but this movie really subdues it. And I think that's kind of sad, because part of the point this movie tries to make is Molly falls for him.
Yes.
And we as the audience are supposed to mirror the emotions of the characters in a certain respect. Now, granted, Ernest does very despicable things throughout this movie, but you're supposed to be taken along this ride that he was manipulated into, that he was emotionally abused into doing these things. And there was points in this movie that I did not feel sorry for him. Well, even though the directing was very clearly trying to make me feel sorry for him.
Well, some of his choices, I think, push you away from him in general. But I think that's a great point because he talks about being in love with Molly and Molly in love with him. And as you said, Robert De Niro's character, his evil uncle, convinced him to do X, Y, and Z. And so you're right. I think it would be more of he loves his wife. He loves his family. He doesn't want to do this. However, he's feeling loyalty toward his uncle.
And there was also supposed to be this youthful naivete. And I just felt like I'm watching Leo DiCaprio in the little boy blue suit try to run around and convince everybody that he's a kid. And I was just sorely disappointed. I feel like they could have picked somebody younger than DiCaprio. And in fact, I would have slotted DiCaprio into the evil uncle role.
Well, and it's interesting because Uncle Hale, his uncle, my understanding in real life at this time, he was actually 45, and we've talked about Robert De Niro's getting close to 80. There is a big difference. However, I don't think it was so radically different that it needed to be recast per se. But my understanding is Leonardo DiCaprio's character was in his, I believe, 20s, late 20s.
Leo does not project late 20s to me in this movie.
No, he feels like a middle-aged guy. I mean, he feels like somebody that, I'd walk down the street and I'm like, oh yeah, we hang out with him. He comes to dinner at our place. I mean, yeah, I would agree with you. And Lily obviously felt younger. But I don't know. There was some definite disconnect. For me, it really... The disconnect was hard for me.
To me, it was severely jarring. And I'd be interested to see if our cinema community agrees with us and would comment below. Do you think they cast this correctly? Or is there somebody else in mind that you would think of for this
and you had mentioned Ben Affleck. And Ben Affleck obviously is,
he's a bit older.
He's a bit older.
But I believe he can play young. The other person, ironically, that I had pitched to you and the rest of the team was Jesse Plemons, who is in this movie.
He is.
As the Ernest role, and then Leonardo DiCaprio as William Hale.
Well, and it's funny to say that Leonardo DiCaprio may have been miscast in some ways because okay, so your thought on Robert De Niro?
It was nice, but he's too old. It oversold the point that he's like this nurturing father figure. You want somebody, especially if you're paying attention to the story, you need somebody that the Osage can trust, that he's come alongside them on this journey. And I feel like De Niro was just kind of like, and he was just like distracted by just the scene chewing.
Oh, interesting. Well, and we both agree on Lily.
Yes, Lily,
really
fantastic.
Gladstone. Oh, and you had made a comment that she stood out. I agree with you. You were talking about her emotions. I know when on the way over the studio, you were talking about her emotions, even when she didn't speak a lot. She said so much, and her emotions around family members passing away, just the dilemma. She has a health issue. She's diagnosed with diabetes, and of course, back then they didn't really have too many solutions, and the ones they did were very limited. And I bought all parts of it. Every scene she was in, I was compelled. And let's talk about the running time. The movie was almost 4 hours.
If you're going to have an almost 4-hour movie, every part of this movie needs to be solid. I know Scorsese has made the comment that if you can sit in front of a TV and binge a show, you can sit down and watch his movie. I think movies require a different emotional attention space. And I think that because some of it was so disjointed for me, I didn't have that emotional attention space. There are several points where I just was daydreaming, and I was still focused on the film, but there's this part in my head that's like, okay, if I cast this better, would it add to it? And I don't want to spend your film doing that.
No, and I agree with you. And I laugh because the 3.5, I say 4 because, they're adding the trailer. So 3.5, maybe getting a little closer. I didn't feel the need to jump up and run to the bathroom, although people around us, we saw it in Dolby, which was kind of funny because sometimes when you're sitting in the seats, you can't really see who's in front of you. And then all of a sudden you see a little figure walk across the screen. Slightly distracting. So my thought was not everyone is able to sit through a 3.5 hour movie. And typically I would be like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. But I was engaged enough. And what's interesting to me was I was engaged enough in the story, wanted to hear it, wanted to understand more. But part of that was I didn't feel that is if I got up and I went to the bathroom, came back, I would know where they were going, because you and I talked about it felt like a lot of little one acts, and not fully cohesive.
Felt like little vignettes.
It did, and it felt like if I missed a vignette, I would miss something significant versus...
That was my big fear, too.
That was a big piece.
I felt like I would be compromising the integrity of the review if I went to the bathroom, especially for how these scenes are like orchestrated into little pockets.
Correct. And it wasn't as if, oh, they're on their way on a road trip and, oh, you missed where they stopped. Or, you know, you can kind of nudge the person next to you and go, oh, what did I miss? It would be like, well, they kind of went back here and they were kind of here and they were kind of here. It would have felt very disjointed to me. And I agree with the compromising the integrity. Obviously, we have to do what we have to do. However, that was a thought in my mind of don't get up and, you know, step out, because you will truly miss something probably significant that will maybe there'll be a callback to it, or maybe it'll tie into this greater story.
And Scorsese is great about creating interconnectivity. Even some of the set design would mirror each other at certain points. Mm-hmm. And it was different locales too, which was kind of cool.
Well, and I appreciate the production design, the set design, obviously, you know, the costuming, all of that played a significant role to me. And I, you know me, cinema community is getting to know me, that set design is something very significant to me. And the costuming was beautiful.
One of the things I liked about the costuming is it told me a lot about the characters, but it wasn't so distracting to me. It really enhanced the characters and the landscape of the environment that they're inhabiting.
Well, and the one part that really stood out for me has been very underwhelming was the music. And typically the music informs me. And for me, it was honestly kind of forgettable, which is surprising for me because I love the music generally.
I was surprised how muted the music is, especially when music is supposed to help you translate to characters that you may not otherwise be familiar with their background.
Well, and I know one other comment we had talked about was the budget. This is a $200 million movie.
This does not feel like a $200 million movie.
It didn't. And I laugh because obviously, you know, we don't make films, we just talk about them. But where'd the money go?
Well, I made a joke about how some of the production costs must be the equipment. But the more that I think about it, it's probably the invisible crafts, you could say, like the costuming or the set design.
Well, and the salary, it could be very much the salary of the actors and actresses, because again, we're talking about Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, you know, well-known, bankable actors. So I kind of was wondering about that, but there was just nothing in there where I said, oh, it must be, this is where the money went. I'm like, I don't know where the money went.
If you had told me that The Irishman, which during our research we discovered had cost $159 million.
Correct. Yeah, their budget was $159. Yes.
If you had told me that that was the $200 million, especially because of the de-aging in certain sequences and just the time that it takes to set up certain sequences, I would have believed you that that was the $200 million movie.
Well, in my understanding, and I'm sure you'll talk a little bit more about it when we talk about Moth ratings, but you like The Irishman scores better than this one.
Miles above this one.
Okay, that's what I'm hearing too. Do we have any questions from the box?
This movie primarily focuses on Ernest's perspective, which is Leonardo DiCaprio, rather than Molly. Do you think this is fair to the story, or does it do a disservice by not really focusing on Molly's perspective more?
I think that Ernest's perspective is a little bit easier for the story that Scorsese wants to tell. Scorsese wants to tell the easy story that treating people for their money on the basis of race is unfair, it's unethical. It's easy to throw Leonardo DiCaprio's character as a vantage point in this world to show that it's obviously wrong. I think Molly, especially with Lily Gladstone's performance, is underutilized when it becomes this. And you lose some of the connectivity that could be gained. Especially because Scorsese takes key moments in Molly's life and focuses on the emotional tangibility for her, and then pulls back to Leonardo when it looks uncomfortable for him to rest in that moment. And I think that's a huge disservice for the audience.
Well, and it's funny, but it didn't feel like she was pushed aside too much, meaning she was in most scenes, she was factored into the equation, but it didn't tell the story necessarily from her perspective, but how she would react and how she would respond. Honestly, I felt like she took over several scenes, not even intentionally,
You
just
want to talk
because it was
spotlight
so
ceiling.
strong.
Yeah.
But there were some scenes that Leonardo DiCaprio performed in that to me were compelling, and I don't want to give any spoilers as to specifics, but his reality of what he had done and his remorse at one point was compelling. Do we have any other questions from the box?
In the movie, there's a powerful scene where one of the characters dies and goes into the afterlife. And Rebecca, you had commented that you enjoyed the scene and you wished there were a lot more scenes like that. Can you expound on what you were thinking?
The box is correct. There is a scene where a important character passes away, and there's this moment of silence where you have the character coming into the afterlife. And I liked it because it wasn't cheesy. I liked it because it felt true to the cultural history and beliefs of that character. But then I liked how it affected the other characters, immediately cut back to the other characters. I wanted to see more moments where Scorsese was willing to take risks, to let the audience kind of sit with their emotions as well as the characters' emotions, instead of just going, well, you have to feel this way, you have to feel that way. I like it when auteurs are not afraid to let the audience experience things and then interpret them on their own terms.
Well, in relation to what you were saying, slightly detoured, but with the Osage people, I would have liked to have seen more from them. Meaning, what are some of their traditions? What are some of their beliefs? And how does that tie in? And there were nods to it. And it wasn't as if Scorsese eliminated it. It just, I think it would have been a more rich movie had those been included.
It felt very subdued. Is that the word you're looking for?
Probably.
Subdued?
It just, and I understand. Again, 3.5 hour movie. He covered a lot, and clearly he's one of the best directors of our day. All right, Rebecca, 5 Flying Moths. Scale 1 to 5 today. What would you give Killer of the Flower Moon?
I'm going to have to kill 2 of them.
Oh, okay. So 3 moths?
3 moths.
And talk about that.
I've seen better from Scorsese. I've seen better from DiCaprio. I believe this movie feels very uneven in some ways, and I wanted to see more of the Osage people. You're telling a story that is integral to their cultural history, and I feel like in some ways it got shunted, it got minimized.
Rebecca, your gold standard of Martin Scorsese is which one? Gangs of New York or Irishman? What would be considered maybe your highest rank for Scorsese?
One of my highest ranks for a Scorsese film is a 5-star film.
Okay, and which would that be?
That would be Goodfellas.
That'd be, oh, yeah.
Then you have Gangs of New York with 4 and a Wing under that.
Okay.
And then you have The Irishman at a solid 4.
Mm-hmm. And then this just trickles down to the 3.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering what your comparison would be. I was thinking that my moth rating would be higher than yours, but it's actually not. Mine's actually a 3 as well. It is above average. I do believe it's worth a watch. The history alone, I think, is something we need to know, because how many people do not know this story?
A tremendous amount of people. I know that Scorsese brings up another story that has recently reemerged into the public consciousness to compare it to this one. And that just to me shows that he's trying to be dedicated in bringing these to the limelight.
Absolutely. And with respect. But a 3, it feels above average, feels like a watch. But I don't know if I would just run out there and say, it's the best movie I've seen. Like you said, Scorsese has other movies that have performed better, but also resonate more. Thanks for joining us. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Watch the notifications for more movie reviews, then come back to the channel this Saturday for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary with snark meant to amuse.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this movie review, you might click the link to check out our review of She Came to Me, or click the link to watch our other recent review of the Taylor Swift Eras Tour.
Remember, cinema community movies are better
Better
together.
together.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next review.